interviewing the leading private equity executives and unlocking the secrets of success. Welcome to the Private Equity Podcast with Alex Rawlings.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Private Equity Podcast. Joining us today is Mario Nigro, partner at the law firm Stikeman Elliott and part of the M&A and private equity group within that business. Firstly, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights, Mario.
Thank you, Alex, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Mario, for those who don't know you, give us a 60 to 90-second breakdown of you, please.
Thank you, Alex. So I'm a partner in the private equity and M&A group, as you had mentioned, at Stikeman Elliott. We're a national Canadian law firm. I'm based in Toronto, Canada, and lived in Toronto most of my life. Started off as a teacher, because you could say a kindergarten teacher. So you could say I've kind of gone a little bit of ways from a kindergarten teacher to a private equity lawyer, but focus on private equity, particularly in the mid-market. Do a variety of work, inbound deals for private equity firms from other countries, Canadian private equity in multiple facets, all across industries, real estate, tech. And so I would be a kind of a classic private equity lawyer, if there's such a thing. So.
Perfect. So what's the one mistake that you see you see private equity firms making, and what actions would you suggest for them to correct it?
So, I mean, the great thing about private equity, obviously, is their ability to take a company, sometimes an underappreciated, undermanaged, underutilized opportunity, and really just take it to another level, really kind of unleash its potential. I mean, we've seen this throughout the success of private equity in the last 30 or 40 years, right? Their ability to take these companies and grow them into something no one even dreamed of by the time that they were being grown. The only thing I find sometimes is missing from that storyline is it's not told to the public. It's kind of hangs out there as this great story that's never shared. And so what happens is when you hear about private equity, a lot of times it's the big bad private equity in the marketplace, the negative story of this kind of big foreign or big company, or images of people in blue suits who are coming to take my company away from me, kind of images. And it's too bad, because the storyline of private equity is often lost. And so I would say, one of the struggles that I think private equity has is marketing themselves. And it's been really, one of those issues that, we know it's out there. We know it's an issue that has to be dealt with, but it's very hard for private equity firms to kind of tell their story. In some ways, if private equity firms were rock stars, they'd be at the top of the list, but they're kind of doing the nuts and bolts work every day, and nobody sees it. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges of private equity. As the private equity space continues to grow, it's the ability to tell the story, particularly to owner operators, that what we're going to do with your company isn't, dismantle it or fire people, or and most times it actually is a great alignment story. We're going to take your business to another level, but that story isn't told, and instead you get images of big bad private equity, and that's a negative that has to be dealt with. And there's a lot of ways that I think private equity can do. I mean, there's people who try to tell that story more, obviously by getting into their communities and getting out in the marketplace more, but more of it needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree. There's too much on, we hear too much about the big Toys R Us blow up, with Axel, KKR, and whoever else invested in that, rather than, the massive deals and the huge turnarounds and everything else that happens, and the huge amounts of growth and local economies. I've said it many times about what private equity does for this industry, for the world and the greater good. I think is fantastic. But it is
you said it very well, Alex. I mean, you obviously take the Toys R Us story, which is got an unbelievable amount of press. And whatever your perspective is in that story, I mean, the problem with that story is it becomes all-encompassing to think that's private equity, right? What's the message when you hear that story? There is nothing else. These people this is all they do. When the reality of it is, most private equity is you buy a 5, a 10 million EBITDA, you buy 20 million of a company, buy 2 million of a company, and you grow it. and you take it to another level, and then you obviously sell it, and you've taken something that started at 5 million EBITDA, grown it to 10, 15, or 20 million EBITDA, and now you've sold it. I mean, that's the great story. You've created jobs, you've created new opportunities, you took in a business where it never went before. You know what the irony is? There's so many of those stories, they get all overwhelmed by the one Toys R Us. And again, I'm not justifying the Toys R Us. I'm not saying, I'm not getting into the value judgments on the Toys R Us. But what's misleading is that one storyline looks like it's the only storyline for private equity, when there's probably 900, 1,000 going on at the same, thousands and thousands of storylines that are positive, that are real beneficial to communities, that completely get lost, that nobody brings up in the press at all, never told.
No, absolutely. Absolutely agree. So putting your legal hat on, Mario, as I'm sure you do most days, what would you kind of describe as what would you say from a legal perspective should private equity firms be doing to improve whether it's through acquisition or sell process? What could they be doing to improve things?
Well, I mean, the reality of private equity by their very nature is to be operationally focused and obviously drive growth. And I think that one of the great success stories of private equity has been the ability to find growth in places where other people don't see it. You take a company where no one else was able to unleash its potential and grow. And so what I would say is, what we're starting to see, and I think is where private equity has to go, is, as we talked about the technological revolution and the impact of technology, more and more we're seeing private equity firms that literally look at a company in terms of the ability to transform it from a technology. There's a saying that says every company is a technology company now, no matter how old school or industrial. And I think that one of the things that private equity, and I believe will inevitably become a part of every private equity firm, is that ability to transform a company from a technological innovation point of view. I think it's starting to happen. We're more and more seeing private equity firms who almost on day one have a kind of technology plan for a company. And I'm not just talking about updating software systems. I'm not talking about buying new equipment. That's the old ways. We're talking about transformative change. I mean, there are private equity firms now whose literally their thesis is, I am going to bring in a cadre of technological experts to take this old school company and really unleash its potential. So that's now, I say that in the context also of a world where people are wanting more from private equity and private capital. They're wanting people to focus on sustainability and diversity. So I think you're going to be seeing, and I think we're starting to see it already, where private equity firms realizing that kind of speaking to this new wave of focus on ESG and growth in a kind of sustainable format. I think the two play to each other. I think we're starting to see it. I think you're going to see it even more as time goes on, where you're going to see private equity firms speak in terms of alignment of growth with social and economic objectives, in terms of larger social and economic objectives. And I think the two could go together. I think there are technological advancements that can make a company, less pollute, more productive for its employee. I mean, the two don't necessarily offend each other. And so I think we're starting to see it. I think if you ask me what we're going to see in the future, we're going to see a lot more private equity firms really focus on diversity, sustainability, and use technology as a way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing that certainly now, bridging into that. So you've obviously seen a lot of M&A processes across various different private equity firms. What have you seen that either a particular private equity firm or done, or a particular process that's gone well? What have you seen that's really impressed you and you thought, if every firm could do this, I'd highly recommend it?
So I think the best private equity firms are the ones that are able to build. For all the talk about technological advancement that I just said, the best private equity firms to me are incredible appreciators of human capital and are able to leverage human capital in a way that just focuses on success. And what I mean by that is, of course, the traditional image of private equity is they go look at a mandate and they break down the financials and they kind of do a deep dive from an analytical perspective on the ability to take this company where it can go. But more and more we're seeing, particularly when it comes to proprietary deal searching and private equity firms that are going beyond what I would call sell side processes that are, obviously focused on, obtaining the highest price. They're realizing that there's another way to do deals, which is and of course it's more elaborate, it's more time consuming, but it's to really build out the relationships with owner operators and management teams in a very long-term way. And there's an argument that takes too long, that the life cycle of a private equity firm is to deploy capital and they can't wait for a management team or an owner who's uncertain. But there are some real advantages to being able to partner with an owner or a management team and build a relationship over the long run. And I would say to you that the private equity firms that are investing in that type of relationship building exercise are seeing advantages, both when it comes to price, but more importantly, when it comes to the human capital to be able to take the business to another level and alignment of interests. Because right now we're in a world where obviously it's just a dynamic M&A market, and sell-side advisors are putting out deals and they're getting incredible multiples because we have multiple inflation with all that's going on. And that's everybody. Like that's across the board, right? We're seeing multiple inflation. What is a private equity firm is trying to be strategic need to do? Well, the ones I see that have been super successful is they spend a lot of time on proprietary deal sourcing, building relationships with management teams, building relationships with owners, really getting what I call behind the process. People will criticize me and say, yeah, but Mario, that takes too much time, too much money, and it doesn't meet our goals. But if you ask me some secret sauce, that's some secret sauce that I'm seeing that works super effectively in terms of buying companies cheaper, but more importantly, in terms of alignment and growth strategy and really being able to maximize what a management team can do, because you get to know each other over 6, 12, 18, 24 months, sometimes even longer. And then by the time you do the deal, these people already are they're your friends. I see with the private equity firms, they talk to management. They don't talk to them like strangers. They talk like they've known them for years. Completely different way of buying a business at that point. Completely, as opposed to a 3-month process where, of course, right now it's all about price. You don't even, sometimes you get to meet the management team for a few hours, and that you're just taking your chance on analytics. So that's one definite what I would call secret sauce point that I've seen with successful private equity firms today in this heated environment.
No, proprietary deal flow is very important. Out of curiosity, how many deals that you see, obviously, in your supporting with from a proprietary basis as opposed to a M&A advisor, investment bank?
It's interesting, right? I would say, so it depends on the deal size. Larger deals, it's very few. I would say it's at best 1 out of 10. But that 1 out of 10 is just incredible to see someone who can buy, a business that's purchase price is 200, 300, 400 million Canadian dollars in a proprietary manner, right? That is where I'm saying, yes, it might be 1 or 2 out of 10, but that 1 or 2 out of 10 rewards incredibly, right? So larger deals, I still think we're in an 80, 90%, sell side, particularly because there's so much deal flow from the sell side advisors, from the investment banks right now that it's they're bombarding you with opportunities. It's kind of hard not to be overwhelmed. Kind of hard to say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to slow down and focus on proprietary relationships when I got so much deal flow. As you go lower into the middle market and into the lower middle market, a lot more proprietary is happening. Part of that has to do with the fact that the sell side advisors are so busy they can't take on as many mandates. So there's opportunities there to kind of get behind them. And that's where you see what I would call real gems, real opportunities where building relationships can find you a really good company for a really good multiple. So it depends. It depends on the size. I mean, if you're looking for big deals, you got to really build relationships with the managements over years. On the other hand, in the smaller deals and the mid-market deals, there's an ability to really get to know owners and get to know management pretty quickly, because sometimes just, they haven't had a lot of contact with people. So you reaching out to them, you kind of are the first person to reach out to them. So I'd say in that market, it's more like 60-40. Still sell side, obviously. Sell side is still dominant in terms of majority of deals, but more and more we're seeing in the middle market and the lower middle market a real focus of private equity firms who are doing a lot more, even what I would call relationship. Look, there are private equity firms that have done cold calls for the longest of times, what I would call hardcore cold call. But there aren't many who will go and out of their way to build relationships with management teams and owners over a long period prior to doing a deal. That we're seeing more and more.
Yeah, we're starting to see a few. We've got a search on at the moment for a deal origination role, which is what I regard as hardcore, old school deal origination. It's not managing M&A advisors. I know a firm in Germany that do exactly the same. They're very heavy cold calling and reaching out to owners and management teams to drive deal flow. So we're seeing a bit of it and seeing more and more of it. So it's definitely a growing area.
And to your point, Alex, it's interesting because the lower middle market firms have been doing that for years, because of course a lot of those deals you got to go and you got to go find them. They're just not out there. And you would think it'd be the reverse, that the larger deal sizes would do it, because it's just the numbers of what you could save or the potential to. Immense. But it's interesting because so much deal flow from investment banks is in the face of larger private. I just think they don't ever have any time, or they don't ever see it as a requirement. I got enough flow. I mean, I've had private equity firms at the upper middle market and like say, I got enough flow as it is. I don't need to do any proprietary searching, or I don't need to build those type of. But I'm like, but you're also playing a multiple in a heated market that's way higher, which you could have potentially gotten for a lot less, and I'll be frank with you, I'm seeing that now in a very large deal where there was a private equity firm to build this relationship with this owner year over year over year. The owner still went to a process and in the end chose that private equity firm, and the deal price wasn't the highest deal price because they just felt a good fit. So
very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that story. I'm glad they went with them and not with someone else. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose, aren't you? Sometimes it will go to someone else. But if you've got 10 relationships and all 10 end up in a sale process over the next 5 whatever years, you're going to get one more and probably at a better multiple than you would if you went just through M&A advisors, investment banks. So that's good.
Agree. I mean, it's an investment. I mean, that's, and I think that's part of the challenge when you hear people talk about it. Some people don't want to make the investment. They think I need a quick return. And obviously I'm conscious that there's a life cycle to a private equity firm, but I mean, fund 1 becomes fund 2, becomes fund 3, and so sometimes these relationships are not about trying to tie it into the life cycle of a fund. They're a longer term building exercise. You got to look at it that way. Anyway, I've seen a lot of people more and more starting to really look at the deal process to be more than even just outreach and more than about proprietary, but a whole other level of proprietary, a real relationship-based exercise. That's what I'm seeing more and more, which I think is inevitable if you're dealing with a world where people are dealing with 10 or 12 or 15 times EBITDA to pay for a company. It becomes more valuable to try to find a relationship where maybe you can, pay a little less and be more assured in terms of your investment. So I think the more multiples go up, the more pressure there's going to be to do more proprietary and to do more unique proprietary type searching.
Perfect. No, I completely agree with that. So you mentioned talents are pretty important from your perspective, and naturally, of course, I would certainly agree with that. What 3 attributes do you believe make a top performer?
In the private equity or in law?
In private equity.
Look, I mean, I still think at the end of the day, what a private equity firm does is analytics and the ability to get behind the balance sheet. And I just still think at the end of the day, that is a core talent. But what like in in my profession, what's becoming even clearer is, in my profession, you need the raw tools of being able to legal skills or raw tools. So I think private equity at the end of the day, analytics and the ability to get behind financial statements to be able to understand in a way that's just, a deep dive is just key. And it's funny because I still see people in private equity who don't. I'm not even a tech guy. I'm not even a finance guy, but you see the difference. You could really see the quality of a private equity professional in terms of how they can look at a balance sheet and get behind the numbers and really understand. But on top of that, what's becoming even more critical, and you see it in the context of the conversation we've been having, as the deal environment gets super fraught, super hot, as it continues to be, that emotional quotient, that ability, the judgment calls, the ability to kind of build relationships to win deals, that, what we'll call it, social intelligence. You've heard different words for it. That is becoming even more important than ever because, everybody's bidding high now. In the old days, it's interesting. We'd always used to say there's always somebody who wants it more than anybody else. All right. Now everybody's here. Why are you picking somebody? It's not because that person went 3 times more, right? Obviously there's still those processes, but a lot of it now is that relationship that you could build in a process, that relationship you could build with owners. And we're seeing more and more that the private equity firms that excel because of those relationships, that social intelligence, that social quotient is becoming more and more key. In fact, probably just as important now as the ability to do modeling, as the ability to do analytics. But and so that element of it, I think, has really changed in private equity. I think there's a real appreciation now that, just because you can do good modeling, you're not going to win deals. You need more. The other thing that I think is becoming a factor, and I think we'll see it more and more, is that private equity firms are starting to focus on diversity of the people that work there, diversity in terms of understanding that, we have to relate to the owner operators that we're trying to, partner with. And so, his old criticisms of private equity that it was the bastion of white males. I think we're not there. But if you look at the associates, you start looking at the VPs, I start seeing a completely different future for what private equity firms are going to become in terms of who the face of them is going to be. Obviously, sure, we'd love to see more women. We'd love to see more diversity. That's a generational thing. It takes time. But I think, in the next 10 or 15 years, you're going to see a transformative nature to what I would call the senior executives of private equity firms. The idea of the private equity firm being only about a white male bastion, I think I still think it's dominated, but I think we're starting to see a transformative aspect. I think even private equity firms are starting to realize, look, man, I need to speak to owners where they're at, and that diversity is a positive attribute. So I mean diversity in its multiplicity of fashions. It's not just about gender or race, but it's about experience. It's about what you bring to the table. I think people are starting to realize I need more of that on my team.
No, I completely agree. We're seeing a lot more of that, certainly driven for a lot of the searches we're doing. We've had more and more gender diversity searches, but also looking at different profiles that bring different exposure. And you get them on your deal team. There's a connection, there's a click between that. There's an individual, obviously you mentioned your Italian heritage. You're doing a deal with a private equity firm and one of the partners is Italian. They might have a little bit of something else that brings to the table there and a bit of an understanding, and that mutual kind of relationship then thrives and benefits from that. So having that diversity is not just about ticking a box with LPs. It's about what addition can that bring to the firm, with additions in thought, in, actually, we're doing an add-on acquisition. It's in Italy. What we don't understand is the cultural differences in Italy, and you go to visit the plant, everything looks good from American perspective or Canadian perspective, it's fantastic. But you point out and go, well, actually, these guys shouldn't be doing that. You can't do that in Italy, and there will be a shutdown plant during the full month of August, and that seems to be the busiest time and busiest demand. people see different things because of their different experience, which we can't be exposed to everything. So I think that's a really good point.
One of the things that, to your point, Alex, on the diversity is, and it's a unique element of the diversity that I'm starting to see that I think is just wonderful, is private equity firms. I mean, I've always had operational partners, or they've always had people who have experience running businesses who will join as, we'll call it operational partner, an ops person, right? It's very popular in private equity to have a member of the team as an ops person. So that obviously is growing. But what I'm finding fascinating is to see private equity firms bring on board people in their 60s, people in their 70s even, who've done that. Maybe sometimes been an entrepreneur, ran a company, sold it, and become part of the team who then, to your point, relate to an owner who's in there. Because of course, we're dealing with a generational shift right now. Succession plan, we've heard about this for so many years, right? This bulge of company owners in their 60s and their 70s, and now even in their 80s, who are selling their businesses, right? We're finally there, right? I think COVID has kind of really unleashed this whole, we've been waiting for it. Everybody said they're coming, that whole generational change. And what I'm seeing in terms of another interesting thing is private equity firms bringing on board owners who are in their older, established professionals who, maybe they've sold their business, maybe they're not ready to retire. So the diversity isn't just diversity, it's even diversity in terms of age. It's even that 65, 70-year-old team members are now been brought on. Why? Because they sell particularly well to an owner who says, I've sold to these people, or I've sold my business to private equity. Look how well it's been for me, and that whole, because of the generational shift, that ability to bring onto the team people who have the same life experience as the entrepreneur. And so what's great is I think that, one of the other things I think we're going to see in private equity firms are a lot more team members who are 60, 70s. Now, obviously people want to retire, but it's interesting to see when it's used as a part of the strategy to sell the success of a firm in a competitive process. This idea of, I will take care of your, this is what you built. Look who is going to be part of our team. He's, an owner who we bought the business from 10 years ago. But more interestingly is to see these older team members who play an active role. They're not just being brought out as, show. I mean, that's been going on. We've seen that, right? Hey, look, meet somebody. But we're seeing these people who actually play an operational role in their 60s and their 70s in these new mandates. As opposed to retiring, they're actively involved in new mandates. So it's interesting to see that the diversity is even happening at the kind of older stages of the life cycle. And I think it makes sense because owner operators like to see, to your point, they identify, right? They identify with somebody who's in their 60s and their 70s and they're still active and they're still engaged, and they're going to help come in and join the team to play a role to help this business grow.
Well, it can be difficult, can't it? I mean, you've got a private equity investor who's never, in the most part, never run a business, and then you bring in these guys who've been there, done that, and it adds a different edge. You're just adding to the toolkit, and also promoting, as you mentioned, that diversity side of things. So we mentioned about the unfortunate scenario with Toys R Us, which obviously gets blamed on private equity there. But what do you love about the private equity industry, and equally, what do you dislike about it?
Well, first of all, the thing I like the most is it helps to pay for my mortgage. So, look, what is fascinating about private equity, and again, I take a step back. This is what I said earlier about where sometimes what private equity is, it gets misaligned inappropriately, and it loses, I think, what is the greatest thing that private equity does, right? What is the history of private equity, whether it's in Europe, in North America, and it's always the same story. Somebody passes the hat, collects some money to buy a business, to grow it, to take it to another level and sell. I mean, that kind of is the underlying basis of private equity, right? You raise private capital to do a deal. And if you think about it, there are so many positive dimensions about it. Someone's taking a shot In fact, whether it's, I mean, I've worked with clients who have done their first deals in their 50s and their 60s. I've worked with clients in their 20s and their 30s. People have a dream, right? They're kind of saying, I'm going to raise some money. I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to buy this business, and I'm going to, I'm all in. It's an all in moment for people, right? Now, and people forget that sometimes, that when they think about private equity and you see the choice of risk, it's misleading for what's happening on the ground every day. On the ground every day are middle market private equity funds, people with no actual funds, people who raise capital as they go, who honestly are betting their career, their professional life on buying a business and making it grow. And it's entrepreneurial, it's innovative, it's the all-in moment, that ability to say, I'm gonna put everything I can into taking this business to a whole other level and grow it and see where I can go. And it's exciting, right? Like, it's super exciting, right? We're talking about, people who want an opportunity to do something special, and they're not trying to destroy anybody. For all the talk about the negatives of private, right? They're literally going to try to raise some money and create something and see where it goes. And that's the essence of private. It's what makes it. That's why it's been successful, because that innovative entrepreneurial spirit, it still is one of the places where, at the end of the day, it's not really overly regulated. It is a place where you can get things done. You could do stuff. I mean, the negatives, I think, of private equity, and some of this has to do with just the success over the last 20 years, the quick successes. It's been hard. Private equity has succeeded so much in the last 10 or 20 years. It has not had the ability to adjust to its success. It's still adjusting, right? And so, things like the ability to reflect diversity, the ability to reflect the kind of environment that the people live in the communities. And I think they're trying. I think but it's funny. I've been involved in private equity for 25 years now. And if you had told me 25 years ago the private equity would be where it is now, I'd say you're crazy. I'd say it can't be. It can't be the private capital could be this big of a part of our marketplace. And yet it continues. And frankly, it's growing even bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, it's getting in the dimensions of it. And so, of course, like anything that grows big and big and big, the social responsibility, the economic responsibility that you have for a lot of these firms, they're just, a lot of private equity firms are literally 6-8 people managing 300-400 million. There is not a lot of infrastructure. Purposefully, they're not trying to spend money on it. They're trying to be efficient. That's their goal, is to build companies and be efficient. And so now we're kind of telling them, all right, wait a minute, I want you to get involved in social enterprise. I want you to kind of do more for the community. I want you to be more reflective of society. Rightfully so. But it's going to take time. Like, they're not built that way, and and I think that's the challenge for private equity. I think inevitably they're going to get there. I think the difficulty with private equity funds is they're always going to be reactive. It's very hard for them to be proactive, given the nature of their investors, given the nature of where they want to go, given the nature of the talent. Young people want to be heard. You can't engage young people in terms of being partners or being members of your firm if you're not giving them more than just a paycheck. That's not where young people are at today, right? They want more than a paycheck, right? So I think they're going to change, but I would say that's one of the challenges of private equity today. They're going to have to adjust. I think they're going to get there. I actually think, for all the criticisms that people will say they've been too slow, I think inevitably the alignment of their economic interests with where society is going actually are closer than people think. I think there's so much diverse talent out there, Alex, that the idea that someone's going to stay away from diverse talent right now is kind of against your economic interest. I think the use of technology to improve companies, to make them more environmentally friendly, like I don't even think that's controversial. Like, I think it's becoming economically the right thing to do a lot of these, what I would call, make a lot of these decisions that benefit society in a larger scope. So I actually think the interesting part is, and I'm going to go on a limb here, I actually think you kind of need private equity to help drive some of the other changes that are going on in the broader society. And I just think it's going to become part of their business model.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope so. And certainly love your passion and energy for the private equity industry, Mario. If anybody wants to reach out to you after this podcast, how best do they do that?
So it's Mario Nigro. I'm it's at Stikeman Elliott. I mean, I have my website. I have a website at Stikeman Elliott. So you can reach me out on the firm website. And feel free to send me an email, and all my details there. But with pleasure, Mario Nigro at Stikeman Elliott. I think from my understanding is, of course, we all Google ourselves one time or another in my life. If I put Mario Nigro at Stikeman Elliott, it come up. So that's probably the best way to find me. And it's got all my details, phone number, email, and feel free. I mean, I'm happy to talk about this. Most of my practice, this is what I do every day, is work with private equity firms. They're 80-90% of my practice. So I live and fall with the success of private equity firms. So I hope they succeed, because I got to finish paying my mortgage.
Mortgage. And also, you'd mentioned as well, Mario, line before we come in, that you're also a fellow podcaster. Do you want to give a shout out to your
your
podcast?
Thank you. Yeah, so I've been doing a podcast. People have been wanting to hear more about the middle market, and I do a podcast called Views from the Market. It's on Spotify and Apple, and it really is 15-20 minutes to talk about what people are seeing in the marketplace from market participants. It's not a lecture, it's not lawyerly, it's tell me what you're working on, tell me what you're doing. This is just such an incredible market. I mean, who would have ever thought, Alex, when COVID started? I actually thought I was going to start playing my guitar again. I thought, okay, here we go. We're going to go through a little bit of a slowdown, start doing some art and getting to my other side of my personality. And then lo and behold, kind of came the summer of last year, and it's been like, for the last year and a bit, it's been unbelievable from a private equity M&A perspective. Like, the amount of activity that's going on right now is, I don't know, if you had said to somebody that we would be this busy in the middle of a pandemic, people would say, you okay? You need to seek some help. And so, I mean, it's one of the unique features of this market right now that we're going to talk about for a long time. And that's kind of the podcast has really been focusing on what people are working on and what they're seeing. And I think you're going to find it's just a very interesting time in terms of where this goes, where the market's going, where deal flow is going. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Alex, I hope this doesn't sound negative. I don't think any of us know. I think we're surprised at the pace. We're surprised at the intensity, but I'm not sure anybody knows what this is going to look like in 6 months. And that's maybe the part that's exciting in a way, but scary in another, right? Because usually you can kind of get a tea leaf, a read on where the market's going. And I don't know, is this going to last? Is this the old debates about inflation and supply chain issues and all, but it's an exciting time. And anyway, the Views from the Market just tries to capture some of what's going on in the marketplace today in short snippets with market participants.
Perfect. We'll pop all that in the show notes. So, well, thank you very much for joining us, Mario. Really appreciate your insight, and you leave us with certainly lots to think about there. And if anything, at the very least, an energetic and enthused view on private equity, which I absolutely love. So thank you very much for bringing that to
Alex,
the table.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alex. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So, and as always, thank you very much for everyone who's for joining us and listening in today. Should you ever need support with private equity professionals or, of course, portfolio executive hiring, please do reach out to me at Raw Selection. But until the next time, keep smashing it. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Private Equity Podcast on www.raw-selection.com.